Hiya, good evening. Welcome everybody. My name's David Joski. I'm a part of the woodwork at Charlie's and now the mad uncle of the haematology department these days. It's my very great pleasure to open the proceedings on behalf of my friend and colleague, Professor Cheah, to celebrate the incredible things that he is achieving and the team who you will meet tonight as well. I would like to make a welcome to country, and I'd like to do that by asking, who knows where Wodgemup is? Where is it? Yeah, Wodgemup is Rottnest. Several years ago, I went to a light show that they put on at Kings Park with the First Nations theme, and I learnt in the course of walking around and listening to the commentary that the local Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation still have stories of walking to Wodgemup. Now, this was in the last ice age, which is about 6,000 or 7,000 years ago. So they have an oral historical tradition that can go that far back and retain the knowledge. I think if you compare that to the ephemeral nature of a tweet, you can see that perhaps we haven't got everything right in the way our society has progressed. So I do want to acknowledge the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation. This was and is Whadjuk Noongar Budja, Aboriginal land, and I acknowledge their elders past, present and emerging. I will tell another story actually. 2 years ago I invited Barry Maguire, who's an Aboriginal elder, highly respected, to an event that I was running, and he told us his people's story and his story, and he said that language is the vibration of the land. It's a fantastic phrase when you think about it, and there's all sorts of ramifications about where people are in that equation. So I suspect there's a great deal of wisdom that we can learn from a people whose culture goes back 70,000 years without wars, retaining the land and nurturing in the way that they have. So we move on, and we're here tonight to celebrate the achievements of the WA Blood Cancer Research Centre and its team, and to thank the donors and to thank all of you who've become involved and contributed in one way or another. You probably haven't thought of it in this way, but what a clinical trial actually is hope. And to not have hope is not to be human, actually. And I'm forever banging on to my colleagues about the need to preserve hope for people, regardless of where they are at. And it might be a change in what you're trying to achieve. Sadly, medicine's the only profession with a 100% failure rate. And we don't achieve immortality, but we can save lives that otherwise would prematurely be lost. And we're lucky in our discipline to be able to do that many times over each year. And our capacity to do that in this town has been enormously enhanced by Jan's ability to get clinical trials up and running in this town. I do want to thank our official sponsors for the evening, UWA, Westbrook Wines, and a lot of volunteers who made tonight possible as well. So with that introduction, I'm going to sit back and enjoy the show, as I'm sure we all will. Jan.
Thanks very much, David. With wisdom and eloquence I can only aspire to. Thank all of you for coming along tonight to hear what's been happening for the past 12 months. I think this is the third or fourth time. That's handy, thanks. I think it's about the third or fourth time we've had one of these events, and I was commenting to some of you in the foyer before we came in that often we're so busy with the day-to-day work of what we do that it's not until you prepare for an event like this that you actually look back at all the things which have happened in the preceding 12 months, 12 months, 24 months, 36 months. And it's actually a very valuable exercise. So I hope that you all enjoy hearing about what's been happening as much as we've enjoyed helping to deliver it. So I show this slide each time, but I think it is a useful thing to refresh our memories about. And I know that many of you in this room are here because you have a personal connection to blood cancer. And many of you would have perhaps had this conversation with me or with someone else on the team. But blood cancers, although they don't get a lot of airplay in the media, they are actually common. And each year, around 15,000 Australians are diagnosed with a blood cancer. And unfortunately, around 7,000 will lose their lives as a result of one. In fact, around 110,000 Australians are currently living with a blood cancer, and that number increases with every day that passes. It's been forecast that by 2030, blood cancer will be the leading cause of life lost from cancer in Australia. As David told you previously, one of the greatest weapons that we have against blood cancers and the ways that we can make things better for our patients is to find new treatments. And the best way to find new treatments is to do clinical trials and to have those available for patients in Western Australia. This slide is something that I don't look back on with fondness, but represents a snapshot of what was available to people in Perth in 2015, which is when I returned from the US. And to cut a long story short, people in Perth were significantly disadvantaged compared with people living in Melbourne and Houston, which were the two cities that I'd worked in prior to coming back to Perth. And it was clear to me that more needed to be done to address this shortfall. So what's happened since then? So the Blood Cancer Research WA project was really kickstarted in around about toward the second half of 2017. And really we've been going in earnest since 2018. You can see that the number of trials that we've been opening per year across the 3 sites involved has increased from a rolling average of about 3 prior to the initiation of the project to somewhere between 10 and 12 as a rolling average for the last 5 years. What that is translated to is a sharp and sustained increase in the number of patients who have been able to access clinical trials in Western Australia. The background to this is prior to this, and one of the main reasons that we started doing this was if you ran out of standard treatment options in WA, if there were no other clinical trials available to you, then the choices that you were faced with were either palliative care or travelling to the eastern states to access a clinical trial. And this was a problem that we were facing with depressing regularity. You can see that since the initiation of this project and the investment that we've made in the people that you see sitting on the front row here, we've been able to increase the number of patients who've been able to access studies from a rolling average of about 30 to over 100. These data for 2022 are incomplete and only from the first quarter of operations. So we're on track to match what we've been doing previously. And these are not profit and loss figures. These are people who have gotten extra lives, extra months, in some cases extra years with their families and loved ones. In some cases, cured of their blood cancer. Unfortunately, not always. But these numbers are telling a much bigger story about lives that are being saved, people given extra time with their loved ones, people getting access to cutting-edge therapies years before they would otherwise be commercially available in Western Australia. So since the commencement of the project, we've opened 96 clinical trials, enrolled 828 patients, and currently we have 39 actively enrolling trials across the 3 sites. So there have been substantial improvements compared with how things were before we started the project. So far in 2022, we've grown the fellowship program, and you'll meet 3 of our current fellows tonight. And they're all amazing and talented people who are making a huge difference to patients with blood cancer in WA. We've been able to stimulate WA Health state government investment into the program, and we've been able to secure matched funding for 3 positions, and we're hoping to expand that further. We have had a sustained increase in what's homegrown clinical trials, which are those which have been our own ideas, where we've obtained competitive funding, which is usually against our international peers, and been able to develop trials which are led from Perth, which is not something which happened routinely prior to this project. And finally, we've been able to expand our immunotherapy program, which I'll share a little bit more information with you about. So if you'll forgive me, I've got a couple of science slides in here. And I really put this up so you can get a small taste of some of the exciting new treatments that we have available and we're making available to patients in Western Australia. And actually, you'll hear from a couple of patients who are participating in these studies, and you can hear firsthand what their experience has been like on these studies. Previously in this meeting, I've spoken to you about CAR T-cell therapy, which is a kind of cellular immunotherapy. And we certainly have had a couple of CAR T-cell studies, including one which is still enrolling. But much of our focus for the last 12 months has been what's called a T-cell engaging antibody. And this is a form of immunotherapy which uses an antibody which redirects the immune system of the patient who receives this treatment and trains it to attack the cancer cell. And it does so in a spectacularly effective fashion. So the side effects that we're seeing from these treatments are different and substantially less in most cases to chemotherapy. We're not seeing people losing their hair. We're not seeing people have damage to their nerves. We're not seeing people have nausea and vomiting so much. And these new types of antibodies are increasingly, apparently, a powerful new treatment that we have that is bringing hope, as David said, to patients with lymphoma that is no longer responding to chemotherapy. We also have a new classes of what's called antibody-drug conjugates, and you'll hear from one of our patients, Corinne, who has been treated with one of these. And these medicines work by using an antibody against a specific target on the surface of a blood cancer cell to deliver a targeted toxin directly to the cancer cell, whilst minimizing the side effects to the rest of the patient. And so the bottom line is that the cancer therapies that we are developing in 2022 are almost exclusively cleverer than chemotherapy. They use the immune system, they block specific aspects of the mechanics within the cancer cell, but they are not non-specific treatments which are causing side effects which are not nice for patients to experience. And that really is what we're all looking for as cancer researchers, is the treatments which are effective, that don't have the side effects of chemotherapy, but that work and that improve people's lives. And so that's really the focus of our clinical trials program. So schematically, to give you some idea of what our outfit was like prior to Blood Cancer Research WA, here at Charles Gardner, we had a group of consultant hematologists who were looking after patients with blood cancers. In each of the 3 main areas of blood cancer, lymphoma, myeloma, and leukemia, there was one consultant who took the lead for that. And there was one nurse practitioner who covered everything, including non-cancer. And I think it's fair to say we were all run off our feet. This is what we've been able to achieve with the now substantial funding which has come into BCRWA, thanks to many of you sitting in this room. We've created a world-class fellowship program with 3 fellows and a 4th about to arrive in the next month. We've created a clinical nurse consultant position. to support our nurse practitioner. And Helena has become a incredibly valuable asset for patients with lymphoma at this hospital. We have just created a second nurse consultant position. Actually, it's a nurse practitioner position for acute leukemia. And that position is currently being advertised and hopefully will be filled by the end of this year. So with the enormous increase in resourcing for patients going through, the trauma and the disruption and all of the overwhelming tsunami of emotions that happen to you when you're diagnosed with blood cancer, having a well-resourced, knowledgeable and expert team like this in place, I think it's fair to say has made an enormous difference. I touched on homegrown trials, and this is something that I'm particularly proud of because it really wasn't something that we were able to do effectively in Western Australia for a long time. And to put it into context, it's fairly straightforward to do an industry study. To do a study which is sponsored by the pharmaceutical industry, pretty much all you need to do is put your hand up and say that you'll do it. And if you'll have a basic check of your site, and if it all looks good, then you'll get to participate in the study. But you've had no input in securing the funding, designing it, thinking about what the questions should be, thinking about how the study should run, thinking about how it should be analysed, thinking about what the population should be, and whether or not it's the right question to ask at any given point in time. The other kind of study is called an investigator-initiated study. They are enormously hard work. It requires probably 2 to 3 years of work just to get to the point where you open one. And we have now opened 2, with a third coming. My first study, which some of you have signed on for, and you've heard from others who've participated in this study in previous years during this meeting, is now close to its interim analysis. And this study I designed for patients with a common type of lymphoma called follicular lymphoma. It's funded to the tune of $1.5 million. We've now enrolled the first half of the study, and I can't share the results yet because we haven't finished the analysis. It's going to be ready for a conference in the middle of next year. But I think it's fair to say that the outcomes for patients that have participated has been overwhelmingly favourable. This is a non-chemotherapy combination, mostly tablets, and replaces chemotherapy for follicular lymphoma. And the outcomes have been at least as good as what you would see with chemotherapy, with few of the side effects. We've just opened this study. The study is called Pacific, and Kat Lewis, who's our first fellow on the program, really was instrumental in helping me get this study off the ground. She wrote the manual or the protocol for this study, and we just had our site activation for this not last week. And it's always a really, as I was saying to Kat, a really exciting day when you see one of your own studies open. It's as a clinical investigator, it's one of the most exciting things that you can see. Along with when the first patient gets on the study, it's really wonderful. So that's now open. It's going to enroll up to 35 patients around Australia and New Zealand with a type of lymphoma called primary mediastinal B-cell lymphoma. It's predominantly this disease affects young adults, women more than men. And this study has been designed to add a immunotherapy drug to standard chemotherapy in an attempt to spare some of the more toxic side effects of treatment such as radiation, which are sometimes required for this condition. So we're really excited about this study, and it's just gotten off the ground. Finally, Dr. Smith, who you'll also hear from a bit later, and you heard from last year when she arrived to start her fellowship from Dublin, has been helping me to co-develop this study called Goldilocks, which is a study in patients with mantle cell lymphoma that has returned after a very widely used class of drug called a BTK inhibitor. I can't actually share the drugs with you at the moment because the contract's not signed and it's not quite public domain yet, but it will be soon. But suffice to say, the 2 drugs which we've managed to secure are among the most active single agents in this particular area. And we beat out everyone in the world to secure these two companies to support this study. And I had a few grumpy emails from my friends in the US and Canada and Europe wanting to know who it was who'd beaten them to the punch. So I was pretty happy about that. And really, it's studies like this and starting to get a bit of a production line going, which really helps to lift the presence of Western Australia and what we're doing on certainly a national and even more so an international stage. And this study will be coming in Q1 2023. With all of these activities, I think it's fair to say that at least from a haematology perspective, we have well and truly put WA on the map in a way that it never was before. I am indebted to all of you in the room who support us, and I know that many of you are here. Gary Johnson, who's a patient of mine, actually took on and organised a charity golf day, Drive for a Cure, which happened about 2 or 3 weekends ago at Cottesloe Golf Club. And it was I have to say, I'm a terrible golfer and I didn't play, but I did go to the dinner afterwards. And the golf day was a tremendous success. Gary managed to get about 6 or 10 football players from both of the AFL teams in town. They played Ambrose, and people paid for teams of 4, and there was a dinner afterwards with an auction. And the event during the course of the event, we were able to raise almost $250,000 towards the program. So I'm just blown away by the incredible generosity and drive of our supporters who can see the value in what it is we're doing. So there are lots of ways to keep track of what we're doing. So our administrator, Eugene Chung, who's over in the corner, is our social media expert as well, and has been busily documenting the achievements and the opportunities available for patients. So if you've never been there, I'd encourage you to have a look at our website. You can just Google Blood Cancer Research WA. There is all of the usual social media avenues as well. And of course, many of you here tonight actually are part of the team. And it's great to see you here, and thank you for all that you do. And none of this is actually possible without the work that all of you do, because I'm just a very, very small part of it. And actually most of the hard work, I'm very aware, gets done by most of you and not me. So thank you for everything that you do in making all this happen. And also, of course, our generous donors, without whom I would not have been able to make all this happen. And most importantly, our patients and their families. And there are many of you here tonight as well. So thank you for putting your trust in us and for letting us look after you. And for, it's a privilege being able to care for you. So thank you. So on that note, I might take this opportunity to introduce Dr. Catherine Lewis, who is our Foundation Fellow, and also tonight's panellists, John Cater, who's a patient of mine, and also Corinne de Villiers, who is a patient of Brad Augustin's. And if you'd like to take a seat, Corinne and John and Kat.
Okay. So thanks so much, both of you, for agreeing to speak to us and share some of your experiences. So I'll start with you, John. Could you just tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, your family?
Okay, I'm 75 years old. I've been married for 56 years to a very caring, considerate woman. I have 2 girls, 2 daughters who are married, and we have 4 grandchildren and 3 great-grandchildren. Heather and I emigrated to Australia in 1969. I'm a retired engineer now, a civil engineer. We've done quite a bit of travelling overseas, working overseas. And basically, that's me.
Thank you. And Corinne, same question. Can you tell us a bit about yourself?
Corinne de Villiers, and I'm married to my primary school boyfriend, who used to rob my marbles when it was recess, but I'm robbing his money now. So, and we've got 2 children, a son in the Australian Navy and a daughter, 32, with 1 granddaughter, and I love birds.
Thank you. So John, maybe slightly less happy things to talk about. Can you remember when you were first told that you had a blood cancer?
Yes, it was in January 1994. I had a tumour in my groin, and that was diagnosed as non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. A bit of a shock. I mean, cancer didn't really register in my cancer didn't really register in my thoughts at that time, and I thought I was quite active and fit, and cancer doesn't get easily fit, which I soon learned was totally wrong. Then for the first 8 years, there was no treatment, and then in 2022, the lymphoma came back, and I had my first dose of chemotherapy and radiation treatment, which chemotherapy is, well, it's kept me alive for a while, but it's not the best. Definitely not the best. At that time, the specialist I was seeing suggested that I get my stem cells and put them in storage, and which I did. And during the next, well, every 2 or 3 years, the lymphoma would come back, and I'd have chemotherapy or some form of radiation or treatment. And then in 2016, I had a stem cell transplant. Professor Cheah organised that for me. That gave me 6 years of cancer-free. And then earlier this year, about 8 months ago, the lymphoma came back. But when I had the stem cell transplant, the lymphoma upgraded from follicular to large cell, which was not responding to the chemotherapy. So, and then 8 months ago, the lymphoma came back. I saw Dr. Cheah and went on to the clinical study.
Yeah, we'll come on to that in just a moment. And Corinne, for you, do you remember when you were first diagnosed? And can you take us a bit about your treatment?
I've got so much to say to you. First of all, I just want to thank you, because you don't know what you meant to me, each and everyone here. I've never seen you, I've never met you. And I just want to say thank you, because you gave me life. And I really appreciate it. We immigrated from South Africa to Perth. I'm very excited. I didn't know what Perth looked like. And we went straight from Kings Park back to the airport, because that's where we landed, to Kalgoorlie. So we started in Kalgoorlie, and I lost half of my heart in Kalgoorlie. So it was a wonderful place. Our kids were little, and we just loved the town, and we loved the people there. Then we arrived here after 3 years, and for some other reason, I went to a naturopath, and she wanted to do a blood test just for a small problem that I was talking about. And she called me on April Fool's Day. She said, you've got myeloma, I think. I said, what's myeloma? She said, well, I think go and see your GP. It is a form of cancer. I thought, no, it's April Fool's Day. Who's speaking? And she said, no, it is 777 Pharmacy, some some place where the naturopath we used to work. So unfortunately, I had to go and see the doctor, and the news was sad, and it was dark, and my little boy was 10, and my daughter was 14. I couldn't believe it because we went immediately. My husband was not there. He was in Esperance for work, and I found him. I said, listen, I didn't tell the children, but I've got something big wrong. And he went onto the internet that we all know don't. And he didn't say anything, but we realized when he's back, because there was not a flight back from Esperance that night, he could only come back the next morning, that it was, I said there, only 3 years. Whoa, my son 10, I will not even see a 7, and my daughter maybe a 12. Oh, and it was just a dark 3 days. And then I saw my specialist, and he said, just calm down, there's hope for you. And what price do you put on hope? Because hope is something that each of you will actually put down as something different. But I was appointed into a primary school art teacher after, that's now like kind of in front, and I had the word hope in the class. And I said to the little children, hope to me is there's always a light. You can never dim the light until you stand at the funeral. So just remember, nothing can take hope away. It will be there for you forever. So they actually asked for me to get myself ready for a bone marrow transplant. I did the bone marrow transplant in 2003. And 1.5 years later, I was appointed in a permanent job at a school for a primary art teacher. And my life began as an art teacher with the little children, because I had a different view of life. And if you ask me now, will I prefer not being sick? I would say no, because sickness became my life. If I walk into linear now, get off my track, I was actually thinking I'm going to do it this and this way. But if I walk in the mornings into linear, I didn't know what linear was. I didn't know how you spell it. I didn't know what to ask for when I found this number. I think it's linear. I don't know where it is, but and they direct me there. And I met the people there. And I'm telling you, I'm working with people that's not from this earth. The people in Kalgoorlie had gold in their hearts. I knew that. The gold was there. And when I arrived here, I didn't want to leave them behind there. But I arrived in Perth, and I felt these big nuggets in the people. And my project team, I don't know where they get them from. I would be overseas on a holiday, and I would get this phone call and this text, are you going okay? I love the photos, and I'm sorry I didn't, and I think, how can they just be so human to me? So as if it's my own family member. And this morning again, I went to Linear, and after 3 or 4 times my iPad swapped out because they were talking too much and we were talking too much. And I have to say, sorry, can you just pick me up again where I had to do the questionnaire? So I did the bone marrow transplant. 17 years later, I started at Linear, and it's now 3 years down the track. And I had a side effect because they warned me it's going to be my eyes. So I can't see that well, but I know you, yeah? And even the people at Lions Eye Institute, the people of you don't know the people there. They are just there to serve us. And it's all because of you. You don't know what you meant to us. And then if I look at my doctors, I just know. I don't read anything. I don't listen to anyone. If Kat says this, that's the rule. If people say this, I say my doctor is not saying that, so I can't do that. So I'm just looking at Kat, and I'm just saying, Kat, what do you think? No, Corinne, you're fine. Kat, what do you think? No, Corinne, relax. She's just there, and I'm telling you, her life is hectic. You don't sit in that chair, and Kat is coming to you. Kat is coming to you. But the moment she reaches your bed, she closes the curtains, and she settles down. And she speaks to your heart. And she gives you the best. So much so that I feel, I think you have to go. There's so many here. And I can just say that I appreciate this place so much that I can't imagine myself leaving Linear, because my project team members, the people looking after my medicine, after all my appointments, they never say you have to do it this way. They say, can you do it this way? No, don't worry. We'll do it this way. We'll slot you in this way. We'll slot you in that way. I can just say, I don't think no, don't worry. What can you do? So if you walk in there, you'll feel it's a different place. If you want to be sick, you have to be sick at Linear. Because there you've got the comfort. I feel so guilty because if anything is wrong, I think that's nothing to do with Kat. But still she listens and she said, will you talk to the GP? But I can also help you. And she helps me sometimes with things that's nothing to do with her. So I just want to thank you for that. And for the donors sitting here. I arrived in Kalgoorlie and I saw the gold in the hearts. I arrived in Perth and I couldn't believe you've got so much gold that you give us. And I hope God will bless you. And I just know one thing, God gave me life, but Linear helped me to live. So thank you so
much. John, so you're still having treatment on one of the clinical trials. So
Yes.
Chan mentioned about these new drugs called bispecific antibodies, and you're having one of those. Can you tell us a little bit about what that's been like going through that treatment?
Yes, it's been so much different to having chemotherapy. I mean, chemotherapy, you feel after the chemotherapy, you feel as though you've been in as you would a boxer. You know, you don't feel too good. You get nausea, lose your hair. But this treatment, this clinical trial, has been so much different for me. Quite frankly, it's a bit like a walk in the park for me. I don't feel ill. I have no side effects to speak of. But it seems to be doing what it's supposed to do. And I get treatment once a week, and I've had 17 treatments so far. I think I'll be having a scan in about a month or so, and then Dr. Chan will determine what dosage to give me after that. But it is so much better. It's got to be the way to treat cancer. You know, chemotherapy is good, but I mean, it does a job, but it's so it's not restrictive. It's everything. Whereas the immunotherapy is specific to a particular cell. As far as I'm concerned, I'm so grateful for being on this trial.
And before we come back to Corinne, I might just ask you, what it's meant to you to be able to have access to this treatment. And had you sort of come across these treatments before, or was this something brand new?
Well, I knew that there were clinical trials going on, and when I was when the lymphoma came back 6-7 months ago, and I saw Professor Chan, he said that there's a potential for clinical trial, and I must admit, I had a bit of hope because I did not want to go through chemotherapy again. And I'm very grateful for the fact that I'm allowed to go on this trial. It just means so much. It means a total different outlook to the way your attitude to cancer and the hope of the future.
Thank you. And Corinne, Corinne has, she's kind of underplayed her side effect, which has really been quite debilitating for her with the eyes. But Corinne, can you maybe just tell us a little bit about your what it's meant to you to be able to have access to the treatment you've been able to for 3 years, I think it is now?
3 years, yes. In 2003, I was admitted after while the bone marrow transplant was just happening. I had to stay in hospital for about 10 days afterwards. And all that you hear was the sound of people vomiting. And that was not a nice sound, but still the people tried their best to make it nice for you there. There was a guy called Elvis, and he was dressed up like Elvis, and the Elvis music was constantly playing. And he was a nurse there, and he made it so much fun for the people in their bad, dark time. And apparently he's still there doing his job there and entertain the people. But when my transplant happened, my count dropped from wherever I think it was in the 30s, the protein. Cat helped me with that scientific names. The protein was about 32, and then I had the bone marrow transplant, and it dropped to almost nothing in 2003. Then slowly it started creeping up. I saw the specialist every 6 months while I was teaching, but still feeling fine. And then when it reached 45, my specialist referred me to Linear and said he think I'm a good candidate to be on the trial. Now, I started the trial exactly this month, 3 years ago, I think the 29th of August. And June 2020, there was nothing. It was totally gone. And until today, Kat told me this morning, Corinne, we did a biopsy, a bone marrow biopsy. It's still gone. And there's just nothing. And you don't know how much that impacts your gratitude for life every day. You will never, ever be the same, because you know this life has got a total different meaning. There's no cancer in me, so you look at everyone different. You enjoy every moment. They grant me 5 weeks to go on a overseas trip. Was it last year? This year? I can't even remember. This year. It was fantastic. I was not sick. My husband said, we're going to go cycling. I think, are you mad? I'm not going to go on a bike again. I'm sick. They say I'm sick. I can't do cycling. But we did cycling. We did everything. So it's due to you. The donors, I hope life will treat you as well as you treated us. So it's just fantastic.
Thank you, both of you. And back to Chan.
Thank you, John and Corinne, for a really powerful demonstration of what clinical trials can mean. And for the next panel, I'm actually joined by our 3 current fellows. You've met Catherine Lewis already, and if you came last year, you would have met Lizzie Smith, who joined us from Dublin, who was only just starting at the time, and currently on maternity leave with her first baby. And we're also joined by Dr. Ross Salvaris, who is a Perth boy, but actually has returned from Monash in Melbourne. So do we have we'll just pass them around. So Lizzie, I might start with you first. Compared with this time last year when we were chatting, what are your reflections in the last 12 months?
So I've had a fantastic year. I have met lots and lots of really amazing people from the staff at Linear, as Corinne alluded to, and all the staff in Charlie's as well. And also I've met a lot of really inspiring patients. I've learned so much about clinical trials and about lymphoma from the team that I work with, from you, Chan, and all the other doctors in the hospital, and particularly my 2 co-fellows who have been really supportive. And I think I've learned a huge amount and done a lot in the year. So it's been a huge learning experience for me and really big growth time in my life. And 6 weeks ago, I had a baby boy as well. So that was also quite a life-changing experience. But the past year has been really a really brilliant experience for me.
Fantastic. And Ross, I might ask you next, because you've joined us the most recently. How have you found joining the team? And how does the job that you have here compare to what you've experienced in other places? Not necessarily naming specific institutions, but just generally.
Yes, so I guess a little bit of a background. As Chan said, I did most of my haematology training in Perth. I left after doing 3 years of training and finished my 4th year at the Austin Hospital in Melbourne, and then did a clinical trials job at Monash for 2 years. And understandably, Monash is a really busy centre. It's a big population in Melbourne. They had lots of lymphoma trials. And I think the things that I've been so impressed about moving back here is not only the opportunities afforded to us as fellows, but also the support that we have within the team. And I think that I'm always inspired by my colleagues in terms of their achievements and their dedication to the job. And I feel that really pulls me up and challenges me. And I think that the way that I see my colleagues striving to do research, to participate in as many projects as possible across Australia and internationally has really inspired me to work in what is a fantastic department with great people. I think you're not just a number here, you're really part of the team, and that's been a real honour, and I continue to love the opportunities I've had.
So good to hear, Ross. I might get you to pass to Kat now. And Kat, you've had a pretty busy 12 months.
Yep.
So Kat has two children who are pretty similar in ages to mine, but she also does all of the work during the day, looking after a lot of trial patients. And then between 8 p.m. and midnight, you get innumerable emails from her about various projects which are ongoing. Kat, you had a big win last year with a project you presented at ASH. Can you tell us more about that?
Sure. So yeah, for people that don't know, ASH is our biggest kind of global haematology conference in America, American Society of Haematology, ASH. And so over the last couple of years, myself and Chan and a colleague of ours based in Denmark, the country, not WA, had led a very large project to try and investigate whether a particular treatment that is quite widely used around the world to reduce the chance of a very devastating and difficult complication from a particular type of lymphoma, to see if this treatment was really effective. There's been quite a few different projects coming through suggesting that this treatment that's quite widely used may not be as effective as we had all previously thought. But none of these projects had really been big enough to prove that properly. And so we thought, let's prove it properly. And so we reached out to a number of colleagues and collaborators around the world to join us and try and answer this question properly, because we wanted to either definitively say that we should keep giving this treatment and it was really helpful for people, or to say, actually, this may be harmful and it's not doing the good that we thought, so let's all stop doing this. And so we reached out to about 50 other researchers around the world, and who joined us and have provided a help to us to run this project. So this is the project that I was able to present the results of in America, virtually last year, which we also had about 2,300 patients. And it was a large enough project to be able to show probably properly for the first time that this treatment was not helpful and may be harmful in preventing this complication. So it's around the world in different places now. There's been a bit of a shift in how we sort of think about whether we should give this treatment or not, and that conversation is probably ongoing and still debated. But I think our project has added hugely to that information that's available for doctors for making those sorts of decisions with their patients. And yes, so we have finally now a draft paper waiting for opinions and feedback from our colleagues who helped us carry out this huge project. So hopefully it'll be published in the next few months.
So it's a monumental amount of work, and I think for patients and for the health system in particular, it has some implications.
Yes, so I mean, for patients, this is the type of treatment we're talking about is a chemotherapy treatment that would typically be given at the end of a block of treatment in patients that hopefully are cured from their, it's a type of lymphoma, so hopefully patients are often cured by their one course of treatment. But if they have a high risk of developing this rare complication, then they may have got these two extra bits of treatment at the end. And those treatments are, they require a stay in hospital for up to about 5 to 7 days, which has huge implications for patients and their lives, and also for the health system and being able to have space in hospital, staff to look after those people, treatments that may actually cause some significant side effects that can even be life-threatening on occasions, damage the kidneys, cause very severe sore mouth, infections, array of other problems. And so in our department and in a number of other departments around Australia and in other countries, there's been sort of a swing away from actually giving this treatment at all, because it's has not as effective as we thought at preventing the complications. So has that benefit to patients of not having a drug that may actually be harmful without giving them any benefit, and also saving inpatient stays and side effects, and money for health systems or for patients and their insurance if they're private, having that in private as well.
And so I think it's worth pointing out, because not all research is clinical trials, and the kind of research that Kat's talking about, where you take data sets which are already existing, but pull them together, tidy them, analyze them in a very scientific way, can still make significant contributions to the way that we practice medicine and save patients from toxic treatments that don't necessarily benefit them. And I think in this particular instance, in a way that a clinical trial couldn't have done, simply because it's been logistically impossible to do one. So well done. So Lizzie, you had apart from your first child, you had another baby delivered recently?
Yes, myself and Chan and a very eminent lymphoma doctor in the United Kingdom wrote a paper reviewing Richter transformation, which is a type of lymphoma. And we pulled together all the information that was available over the last few years and wrote a very up-to-date review of this lymphoma. And it was published in a very eminent journal recently, for lots of people to look at and review and gather that information. I know my colleagues in Ireland have been referring to it, and it's nice to see that you can see with Twitter these days that around the world people are picking up on this paper and have, I think, found it useful. So, Cheah, that was a really fantastic opportunity that you gave me. So that was one of the highlights of my year.
And what were the main things that you learned from that project? What did you take away from it?
So for me, I had done a few small projects in Ireland, but nothing kind of such a large scope. So I learned a lot about writing a paper. Chan very patiently went through it all with me and highlighted a number of areas where I could strengthen things, and that was really useful for me. I think I've been able to bring that forward to further projects that I've done since. I learned how to analyze data that's out there about medications, and a lot of the treatments that are up and coming in this Richter transformation area. We have clinical trials where we're using those. So reading about them and learning about them from the literature was very useful for my clinical practice as well.
And Ross, I just want to bring back to something which you said earlier about the the team and working with Kat and Lizzie and the other fellows. I've got to say, my favourite time of the week is actually the team meeting that we have on a Monday after we do the lymphoma clinic, because for those of you on a Monday morning, when Lizzie's back from maternity leave, the four of us and Helena will sit at the end of a clinic and we'll just run through every single patient that we've seen collectively in that clinic and just shoot ideas around and think about what happens next and if this, then that. And I find that the most interesting 15 minutes of the 30 minutes or whatever of the week, for all kinds of reasons, but not the least of which because it's so nice having such smart, talented and hardworking and motivated people just applying all of their intellect to solving the problems of our patients and trying to make their lives better. What's been your experience of that meeting?
Yeah, I think it's an incredibly valuable meeting. I mean, not only is it a lovely way for us to come together as a team to share our weekend and then to talk about the patients, it's often really surprising in terms of the brainstorming that happens because some of the challenges we face are really complicated. Often there is no one right answer, and it's really handy when everyone in that environment is happy to share their thoughts, to say, okay, have you thought about doing this? What about that? Okay, why don't we think about this avenue of treatment or investigation? And not only is it a great way to learn from your colleagues, but it's also an environment where your opinion matters and you feel supported to contribute. And I think it's an incredibly valuable time for us and makes a really big difference for the care that we are able to give to patients. So I totally agree. It's a really useful experience and a great way to start the week.
The final thing I'll say about that meeting is that I often feel I learn as much from you guys as the other way around. I might let you guys get back to your seats, but thank you very much, all of you, for coming in. So the next part of this evening is we are starting to draw to a close. You know that from the inception of this project, we have been privileged to be supported by the Snowdome Foundation, which is headquartered in Victoria, but now a national blood cancer charity with international reach. And for those of you who don't know the background, when I first started this project, the idea of actually, starting everything from scratch in terms of having an entity with independent charity status and all of the logistics and governance that's required with that piece, to me, with no background in that, felt completely overwhelming and I didn't know where to start. But fortunately, one of my mentors, whose fellow I was, or whose registrar I was in Melbourne, Miles Prince, had done it all before. And Miles had started Snowdome 13 years ago in Melbourne and really had been doing this for a while already. And I remember distinctly when the idea crossed my mind that I should get Miles's help with this. We were on a plane to Ash and I was sitting next to Miles and I said to him, I would kind of like to, I've got this idea, I want to do this in Perth. What do you think? And he said, come present to the board and we'll help. And they did in a way that exceeded my wildest expectations, to the point where Miles and some of the board members flew out to Perth. They helped me to talk to people and build a network, and they flew out again when we had our launch dinner. And really, none of what we've achieved as a group would have been possible without the instrumental backing and guidance and advice and mentorship that I was afforded by everyone at Snowdome. And so I'm very grateful for that. And one of the themes of the evening, I think you can probably hear, is about mentorship and about growing the next generation. And I think organisationally, at Blood Cancer Research WA, we are moving in that direction as well, which is why we are able to announce a celebration tonight of the formation of Blood Cancer Research WA as an independent entity with independent charity status, with an independent board of directors based here in Western Australia, but not in any negative way at all towards our association with Snowdome. Really, this is a celebration, and only possible because of all of the guidance that we've had from you and everyone in Melbourne, Kirstee. So I would like to say a heartfelt thanks on behalf of the BCRWA board for everything that you and the Snowdome board have done to support us in Perth. And I would also like to thank you for coming across this afternoon to attend tonight. And I would like to invite you to say a few words as well. So welcome, Kirstee McBeth, CEO of the Snowdome Foundation.
I would like to point out that isn't me on the screen there. That's actually Catherine Cummins, who is our Gunn Family Fellow Women in Haematology. Sorry, the Gunn Family Fellow for Women in Haematology. You might actually know Belinda Guo, who is the first recipient, who is actually in WA. So good evening. I too would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we gather and recognise the Whunjuk Noongar peoples and the unique wisdom, commitment to country and their spiritual relationship to the land, waters and seas. We pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to all First Nations people present today. I am delighted to be here. I am very honoured and often humbled to be the CEO of Snowdome Foundation, and especially when patients share their stories. So Corinne and John, thank you for that. I remind my team constantly that we are storytellers. We are the narrators of hope, and we're the custodians of the stories of people that we've lost. So that journey is very unique, and to share it is an honour to hear. So thank you very, very much. Cheah has actually spoken about everything that's in my speech, which is lesson learned. We should probably exchange them before we start. So I'm going to have to ad-lib a little bit on this one. And I'm delighted here to announce this next chapter. And I think, and I'll talk a little bit about some of the achievements that Cheah hasn't talked about. But back in 2018, the disparity between blood cancer trials and blood cancer patient access to trials was significantly different between Melbourne and Sydney and WA. And in Perth, Cheah approached, as he said, with Miles on the plane and to seek support, and his vision was very clear. He wanted blood cancer patients in Western Australia to have access to clinical trials in their home state, and we couldn't have agreed more. So in April of that same year, I don't know if Cheah remembers this, it was only 4 years ago, but through Snowdome support, the very first fundraising event in Western Australia was held, thanks to the generosity of the guests, in particular Adrian and Michaela Finney, in conjunction with Como, the Treasury, and Wildflower. $550,000 was raised. This enabled blood cancer research to employ staff necessary to establish the Research Centre of Excellence and facilitate access to next-generation treatments through clinical trials. I am going to contradict Cheah at this point in time because the figures that he showed before, very, very sadly, there's actually 19,000 people estimated to be diagnosed with a blood cancer in 2022 alone. When Snowdome started in 2010, it was the catalyst. And I don't know if many of you know, Miles Prince, who is Cheah's mentor, had a patient called Dr. John Tandy. And John's son, Rob, is one of our founders along with Miles. And John was diagnosed with myeloma, and Rob's first child had just been born. And he didn't want to he wanted his children to grow up knowing their grandfather. So the concept of Snowdome came into consideration. And very sadly, there are no screening programs or lifestyle changes for blood cancer. And that became very evident when Rob was looking for, how do I raise money? How do I get translational research and clinical trials happening? Very sadly, 3 weeks ago, we lost John after 13 years. It was a very, very sad event for us. At the same time they were founding, Grant Rutherford had lost his daughter, Chloe. And the reason that we're called Snowdome is that Chloe used to go in for treatment into the Royal Children's Hospital, and in the nurses' station, and I hope none of you have to go in there, they've got Snowdomes from all around the world. And Chloe was so fascinated with them that Grant's friends and family, every time they took a trip, would buy her a snow globe. So hence our name and hence the reason why we're established. So blood cancers now are the second highest form of cancer death in Australia. They take more lives than breast cancer and melanoma combined. And as I said, 19,000 people are expected to be diagnosed in 2022 alone. Since Snowdome was established, prevalence of blood cancer is up 41%. And so it galvanises myself and the team that we need to raise money. So far, we have invested $42 million into blood cancer research across Australia, and we're hoping that that figure keeps growing, because as prevalence grows, more clinical trials are needed, and that in itself builds hope. And Corinne, I think you articulated that beautifully, that we need to drive for hope, and that's why Snowdome exists, to make hope real. So $550,000 was raised in the first event. The other thing that I wanted to mention was the collaborative partnerships, because it's not just Snowdome. Linear Lymphoma Australia, the Rachel Doherty Foundation, St Charles Gardner Hospital, and the University of Western Australia also provided much needed financial and structural support, and we couldn't have done that without them. So after that fundraising event, in less than 6 months, and this is where I'm really going to blow Chan's trumpet here, the number of blood cancer recruiting trials more than doubled from 8 to 19, which was an incredible achievement. 4 years later, that number, as you saw, we're up to 96 active and closed, with 828 patients, which is an incredible result. Snowdome's vision is singular in its focus, and that's to give every Australian the best opportunity for a cure. We're incredibly proud to have supported Blood Cancer Research WA, and we've loved working with Chan and the team. Since it was established, you'll be very proud to know that $2.2 million has been raised and invested into blood cancer research here, which is an incredible achievement in such a short space of time. None of this would have been possible without the vision of Chan, without Snowdome, and we play a little bit of a part in that, but the incredible generosity of donors, the support of the numerous committees and team members at both Snowdome and BCRWA. So thank you to everyone that's contributed to the success, and we are very proud. An ex-chairman of mine, who was a very wise person who used to run British Airways, once said to me, Kirstee, people in organisations are like houseplants. Every now and again you need to be repotted. So I'm very pleased to announce that BCRWA is about to be repotted. We couldn't be prouder. We are very, very chuffed to have been part of that success. And from January 1, BCRWA is flying solo. But when I say that, we will still remain very collaborative. We've got partnerships that will continue to extend. And Chan is also chair of the Australasian Lymphoma Association, which is under the auspices of Snowdome as well. So we look forward to that. The other thing I would like to say thank you, and I can't see her in the room, is last October, Lucy Westbrook joined the team at Snowdome. And wow, what a girl. It's going to be such a loss that she won't be part of our team exec meetings. We were very fortunate that she flew over last week so we could say goodbye to her. But that's probably the only sad thing that I have to announce today is missing them. So on behalf of Snowdome founders, on the board and the executive, thank you very, very much. Congratulations to you and Eugene, Mark, the board, the committees. I think it's absolutely fantastic. So congratulations, and we look forward to seeing your every future success.
We've got a small token of our appreciation for everything that you and the Snowdome board have done for us. So hopefully this finds a nice home in the offices in Melbourne.
It will. It's beautiful. Thank you very much for Lucy. You chose it. So love a black cockatoo. I came from the fine arts as well, so it's really lovely. And we need some artwork on the wall. So thank you very much, everyone.
Just briefly introducing the board of directors for the newly established Blood Cancer Research WA. I'm about to turn the lectern over to Mark Westbrook, who's the chair of the board in a moment. Michaela Finney, unfortunately, unwell and not able to join us this evening. Philip Cardaci, who's sitting on my right here, and Dr. Gavin Cull, who of course known to many of you and one of the foundation haematologists in the unit. Mark.
Good evening. Thank you for everyone turning up tonight and hearing what Cheah had to say. It's always incredibly inspirational to hear of the work that's being done by the people in Blood Cancer Research WA. Great to hear from the fellows. I really like the stories from the fellows, which points out that this project has multi-dimensions. The first dimension is we're assisting patients who have perhaps exhausted all other conventional treatments to get access to trials to enable them to have hope. By them taking those actions, they're enabling other people to have hope in the world, and those people are not visible to you, but I can assure you they greatly appreciate the work you're doing on their behalf, and the team that we have supporting you is a minor contribution in some ways. So thank you very much for that. We have had the real privilege of having support from Snowdome. I initially joined as a committee member of the fundraising under Snowdome, and then I ended up being chairman when Michaela appointed me. And then we raised money under the auspices of Snowdome, but it did become apparent that, as we've grown the organisation, rather I should say, as Cheah has grown the organisation, attracted to what we're doing. Great fellows. We're building now with 4 active fellows and active nursing staff. And what I learned the other day from Gavin Cull, one of our directors, is that we're also indirectly through that process supporting a large number of people working within the hospital system that otherwise don't have access to be able to engage in that sort of work because that sort of work wasn't available to them here. So we get this sort of multi-dimensional benefit from having an infrastructure to deliver trials, and those trials continue to amaze me. Sometimes Cheah tries to explain them to me, and I conveniently forget and he tries again. Anyway, I'm really lucky because I have been able to work with donors. We have a very relatively small group of donors, but the donors that we have are extremely generous, very, very generous. And those donors have stepped up each and every time we've asked for support, and in many cases gone well beyond what we were asking. They've looked at the work being done. They appreciated the benefits that are flowing. They appreciated the opportunity we're now creating for medical teams in Western Australia, and they've contributed very, very generously. And that gives Cheah the confidence to continue to talk to fellows that are interested in working in the program. That's accelerating. We've been able to attract further fellows. We hopefully will have a team of 5 fellows eventually, fairly soon, and that will enable us to continue to grow the work that we're doing here and become what I think will become a nationally and perhaps globally very, very significant blood cancer research institute. And with that, the movement to establishing Blood Cancer Research Limited as a separate charity was inevitable, I think, so that we can have the entity and people can be attached to it and can enjoy the esprit de corps, the camaraderie and the learning from each other, as well as provide an attachment to what is going to be great work or continues to be great work. So to all of the people, the donors, the fellows, the nurses, to Cheah and the haematology team, to the patients and to Snowdome, thank you very much. It's a great privilege to be able to lead this organisation as a board chairman, and we look forward to continuing to grow and develop the organisation further. Thank you very much. I too would also like to thank, we have a very, very small team in the organisation at the moment, outside of the fellows and nurses and the haematologists. First, we have Eugen, who works within Chan's office and does the marketing communication. Thank you, Eugen. It's been a great contribution you made this year. Lucy, who Kirstee referred to earlier on, took on the job last October on the request of her father. She might think that it's actually the instruction of, but nonetheless, she took it on. She's thrived in the job, and she's really contributed. And we've had a lot of activity this year for what is a very small organisation, and she's put in a big effort to help get us to where we're going. So I'd like to thank those two people very much in particular. So that surely concludes our night. Another really informative night, Chan. Thank you very much for that. And to our fellows, thank you very much for your contribution and the information that you've passed on. I particularly like the idea of homegrown trials. And it's a development this year that we didn't have last year, and I think it points to the evolution of the organisation. So it's really great to hear that. We're going to wrap up now. Thank you all for coming. We still have some drinks and nibbles outside. I think that's what Lucy's looking after, perhaps. So I invite you to stay and have a bit more of a chat, have a chat with the fellows and the patients if they're willing to do so. And following that, we'll chuffle off into the night. Thanks very much.